Well, we're either in day three or day 333 of the second Trump administration. I don't know yet. It feels like forever. And to unpack the past couple of days, I brought back friend of the show and congressman representing New York's 10th district, Congressman Dan Goldman. Congressman, how are you, sir?
Well, I've been better, Josiah, but hanging in.
Yeah, so again, the timeline seems muddied at this point. Again, I can't figure out calendar days. I think it's just been 3 days, but it feels like a lot longer than that. And Donald Trump has done a lot of things immediately upon taking office that he's broken major promises. He's really sent the wrong signal towards rule of law. So let's unpack some of this. January 6th, Donald Trump gave a sweeping pardon to January 6th defendants. It was reported about 1,500, but I've been reading other reports saying it's actually closer to 1,600 pardons, about 1,583, and then the 14 that he didn't pardon that were charged with seditious conspiracy and more major crimes. He gave commutations to them. So let's talk about this because this is a major, major deal. Can you unpack your reaction to Donald Trump's pardons and commutations?
It is, as you said, an egregious attack on the rule of law. It is an egregious attack on our democracy. To pardon criminals who violently attacked more than 107 and injured more than 170 men and women of law enforcement, police officers who were trying to protect the Capitol that day, is to send a message that I am going to favor violent extremists over our brave law enforcement officers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Josiah, because what Trump has done here is he is in his effort to whitewash January 6th and to continue this completely bogus narrative. Somehow he's going to gaslight America into believing that we didn't see what we saw with our own eyes, that this was some peaceful protest outside the Capitol and they were taking a stroll through the Capitol. The video is there. We all watched it at the time. We've seen the video over and over and over again. And these people have been convicted by juries or admitted their own guilt as part of a plea agreement. And to let violent rioters and insurrectionists out of jail to eliminate their convictions is to send a message that I, Donald Trump, will support far-right domestic extremists like the Oath Keepers, like the Proud Boys, and I will be your get out of jail free card. So it is giving license for these people who have already demonstrated that they are ready, willing, able, and will execute political violence to have the further protection of the President of the United States, who has now let them out, whose fealty they give to him even more so, and are clearly emboldened and encouraged to be a militia for Donald Trump. And that's why this is so, I mean, that's part of the reason why this is so serious, is this is not over. This is in many ways just beginning. And the threats of violence are real, and we've seen it. And Donald Trump is embracing that to use it for his own political advantage.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to unpack here. I read in some of the reports that more than 600 of the 1,583 defendants either were charged with attacking police officers, assaulting police officers. You had 172 that pled guilty to assaulting police officers. I think 69 that pled guilty to assaulting police officers with a deadly or dangerous weapon. And just these sweeping pardons and commutations. The fact that, let me ask you this, he obviously campaigned on pardons of some sort, so nobody can be totally surprised. Did part of you expect a more targeted approach, or did you expect that there would be these blanket pardons and commutations?
Well, my expectations were based on comments from people like his vice president, J.D. Vance, who said that anyone convicted of a violent felony, an assault of a police officer, would not be pardoned. Or Pam Bondi, who in her confirmation hearing for Attorney General said that no, she does not support pardoning violent criminals from January 6th. Or Tom Tillis, the senator, Republican senator from North Carolina, who also said in that Attorney General confirmation hearing that he opposes pardoning anyone convicted of violent assault. So my expectations were based on representations that people very close to Donald Trump, including the vice president, made. And the one thing I would question a little bit is, yes, he indicated that he would do something as it related to the January 6th defendants. He at one point said it would be case by case. This clearly is not case by case. But he ran on the economy and the border. And polling demonstrates that even before his blanket pardons, close to two-thirds of Americans opposed pardoning anyone involved with January 6th. So the fact that he went ahead and did this on day one is a real message to his own party, to the American people, that whatever he said before he took office is irrelevant because he is on a revenge and retribution tour. His additional executive orders have borne that out. And that is what his focus is going to be. It is going to be on rewriting history to preserve his own legacy, to gather more and more power, and then to wield that power in an increasingly authoritarian and fascistic way to take control of our government.
Yeah, I mean it's really sobering. You said so much there that needs to be unpacked. Yeah, the polling on this is wildly unfavorable to Donald Trump. To your point, but Congressman, I'll also say, and I'm sure you all are thinking about this, or at least I hope you are. You know, in our previous dialogues, I pointed out facts don't speak for themselves. And one of the things I think that has plagued the Democratic Party is this false reassurance. Well, the facts and the polling on so many issues favor the Democratic Party. During the campaign, there were blind polls conducted of policy positions held by Donald Trump and Vice President Harris, and Vice President Harris's positions were overwhelmingly more popular. But at the end of the day, it's up to the Democratic Party, it's up to those of us in the media to actually represent the facts in a persuasive way, not simply say, this is the fact and this is how it goes. My concern is Donald Trump. We're day 3 into Donald Trump's presidency. He's already pardoned these criminals, these seditious criminals, these people who participated in an insurrection at his behest. I hope you all don't just assume that outrage about that will persist for 2 years. You all have to, and we have to, persistently make the case of what this represents, because I would refer back to the previous election. A lot of people were convinced that outrage over the Dobbs decision, Donald Trump acting in a way to strip reproductive rights from the American people, that outrage would be sufficient to carry Vice President Harris to victory. It's not. What the American people has proven is that they can get used to just about anything, no matter how outrageous. So do you all plan to make, I'm sure it won't be the totality, but do you all plan to remind the American people on a regular basis about what this action represents?
Absolutely. And this one in particular is one that we are going to repeatedly refer back to. And part of the reason is because it says so much about Donald Trump and the Republican Party that all of this lip service about backing the blue is bullshit. That when they'll only back the blue when it's convenient, when the blue is providing a barrier to their efforts to overturn the election at Donald Trump's direction, then we're not backing the blue, we're assaulting the blue. And the other thing is that there are very few checks and balances on the pardon power. You know, he issued an executive order, as you know, essentially nullifying birthright citizenship. Well, that's in the Constitution. 18 state attorneys general have already filed a lawsuit against that. There is a possible remedy to correct for that, but there is no remedy that we certainly have in the minority in Congress to address the pardons that he has issued on day one for violent criminals who are domestic violent extremists. And Chris Wray, the FBI director, said they are the biggest threat to the national security of the United States. And it's going to have an impact on our electoral process. And this is how democracy dies. It does not die overnight. It is slow. But I am certain that I have colleagues, I know I have colleagues from talking to them, who are a little more scared today and who are a little more worried for their families today because the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are not only out of jail, but they are encouraged and emboldened by the President of the United States to continue their extremist violence. And if you have elected officials who start to be influenced by safety concerns because of endorsed conduct from the President of the United States, that is when authoritarianism begins. That's how it begins. And this is going to be a slow but very persistent effort to erode our democracy and our rule of law, because any form of accountability for Donald Trump is dangerous to him. And he objects to it. He doesn't think it should apply to him, and it gets in his way. And so the underscoring this is going to be a very consistent theme that we are going to focus on.
Yeah, I hope so, because there's just so much implicated in this. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong. You know, you were a career prosecutor. My understanding is because of the pardons, like any prohibitions on some of their civil liberties. So, for example, like gun ownership, for example,
Yep.
they're all eligible to own guns again, right? And firearms, correct?
That is correct, other than the 14 that were commuted rather than fully pardoned out of the 1,583. But that's right. And in fact, the QAnon shaman or whatever he said went immediately on social media and said, "Thank you, Donald Trump. I'm out. I'm going to go buy some MFing guns." That's his first thing he said.
Yeah, that's incredibly terrifying. To close the loop on the January 6th pardons, because it sure seems at this point that accountability, really at any level, from Trump on down, for the first time an insurrection had ever been fomented by a sitting president, that's basically shut off between the Supreme Court immunity decision, the suspension or the termination of Special Counsel Jack Smith's cases against Trump, these sweeping pardons. We also saw earlier today, Jake Sherman from Punchbowl News reported that Mike Johnson was asked at a news conference about these pardons, and he says, well, it's the president's prerogative. We move forward. He was then asked about President Biden's preemptive pardons for members of the Biden family and also for members of the House January 6th Select Committee and others. And the speaker reportedly said, well, Congress will look into that. So do you expect moving forward that your Republican colleagues in the majority will be very selective when it comes to the scope of the pardon power and presidential ethics, or do you think that they'll be consistent, Congressman?
Well, I mean, this is a pattern that is not new. The hypocrisy is a feature, not a bug, of the Republican Party. And we saw it, frankly, in the last Congress with all of this focus on the Hunter Biden's foreign business activities, which they never connected to Joe Biden in any way. And yet there's so much evidence, including an emoluments report issued by the minority Democrats on the Oversight Committee about all of the money that Donald Trump made directly from foreign countries, including Saudi Arabia, including China, while he was president. But that is not worth investigating by the Republicans. Only Hunter Biden, who's a private citizen, his business dealings are what you investigate. And that's the same thing with these pardons. And let me just make one point about the pardons, because I have heard a lot of Republicans try to equate what President Biden did and what Donald Trump did. And that is absolute bogus. President Biden pardoned individuals who did nothing wrong, who were charged with doing nothing wrong, some of whom had already been investigated, including his brother, and no charges were filed, solely because Donald Trump, Kash Patel, his FBI director, and many others in his orbit have threatened to go after them and prosecute them and use the power of the criminal justice system to go after his political enemies. That's the only reason President Biden pardoned them. There would have been no pardon if we had a normal president who respected the rule of law and was not going to use the criminal justice system to go after his political adversaries. That is a far cry from letting seditious conspirators and violent criminals who assaulted police officers out of jail, who are already convicted. So we're talking apples and oranges here. The Republicans will try to consistently make it equivalent. It is not, and we should not give any credence to that comparison.
100%. I mean, we've seen even in the past 48 hours so many Republicans who I think were caught flat-footed by Donald Trump's decision to give these sweeping pardons, trying to create a false equivalence to give themselves cover. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, chief among them as well, but even some of your colleagues in the House. But obviously, you're right for various reasons. It truly is apples and oranges, and what Donald Trump did with his pardon power is incredibly more dangerous and corrupt. But you mentioned early in a previous answer, talking about executive orders and Donald Trump's, what he promised to do when he was president, why voters voted for him, to deal with the economy. And I should point out, Congressman, that one of a couple of broken promises just in the first 24 hours from Donald Trump. Number one, he promised that he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. He failed to do so. And number two, he said that he would lower prescription drug prices, but he signed an executive order rescinding one of President Biden's executive orders aimed at targeting co-payments for Medicare and Medicaid. So he is, in effect, working to raise prescription drug prices on the American people. And the guy's only been in office for a few days. So what parts of Trump's agenda do you think he's actually going to focus on in terms of what he told the American people?
Probably the only thing will be the border and immigration, and maybe energy, which he just has totally wrong. The idea of disincentivizing private companies from investing in renewable energy makes no sense, even if you want to support oil companies and oil drilling. The more energy we have, the more different types of energy we have, the more energy independence we have. The less we are reliant on our adversaries and, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, who set the oil markets. So his energy policy is wrong, even though he did promise that. But on the economy especially, and we are going to be taking very, very close note of everything that he does. I believe that executive order that you referred to was the only one that really addressed costs, prices, affordability.
And it went in the wrong direction, and he addressed it the wrong way.
What he did was he helped Big Pharma over the Medicare patient or the average American who has exorbitant prescription drug prices. He undid the efforts by President Biden that successfully lowered prescription drug prices on day one. He has done nothing else out of his more than 100 executive orders to address costs or inflation or rent or childcare or affordability in any way, shape, or form. He has started his retribution and revenge tour. He has started implementing Project 2025. And for all those out there, and I heard plenty of intelligent people tell me, oh, well, Donald Trump said he had nothing to do with Project 2025. We're starting to see what we already knew, but that it's important to point out that Donald Trump is a pathological liar, and he will say anything to get a vote or to get support, and he will do the exact opposite. And what we have to do is not only point out all the promises that he broke and has not kept, and not only point out all of the lies that he has made and will continue to show, but we really need to emphasize that it's not about listening to what he says. We must watch what he does. And we cannot believe him, so we'll focus on what he does. And that's where he's going to show his priorities and what matters to him. And as I and many others foreshadowed, his priority is a revenge and retribution tour. That's what he is doing. He can disavow Project 2025. He can say, as he has, that the politicization of the Department of Justice ends now and he will not use it for political purposes. That's all bullshit. That's exactly what he's doing. So let's not listen. No one should listen to what he says. We should be focused on what he's doing.
So, one last question for you, Congressman. I want to be respectful of your time, but on that score, obviously, Trump is going to do everything in his power to take credit for things that President Biden and the Democrats have done while simultaneously working to undo them, like prescription drugs, for example. You all are in the minority once again, but one of the things that people have noticed during the last Congress is that House Democrats brought the fire. The freshman class, of which you were a part, you guys really raised the game. I even think you brought out great stuff in Congressman Jamie Raskin. You guys like constantly like ratcheted up each other's game. What can people expect from you all this Congress? Are you all going to bring the heat even more? Like, what is the mission? Will every time egg prices don't raise, will there be a Trump "I did that" sticker? Will you be drawing attention to it? What can people expect from you and your colleagues this Congress?
Look, I think um, we are certainly going to be aggressive, because now, in truth, all we have is messaging. We don't have any control. We don't have any subpoena power. We can't open investigations. We cannot do proper oversight. That is all in the Republicans' control. And we've seen they have no interest whatsoever in their following their oath to the Constitution, and instead they view their oath as to Donald Trump. So we will have to be loud messengers, but we also will have to be strategic messengers, which is why I'm focusing so much on these January 6th pardons, because they are emblematic of the corruption, of the authoritarianism of Donald Trump, and of the bullshit when he says he backs the blue and he literally pardons people who assaulted and in some cases ultimately caused the death of police officers. He let out somebody who dragged a metropolitan police officer out of the Capitol, tased him, made him have a heart attack, and he almost died. He ended up surviving. That guy was just let out of prison and pardoned. So, that's the kind of thing that he's doing. And then he's asked about it last night, and he says, "Oh, we'll take a look at that." What are you taking a look at? You just pardoned him. You're supposed to take a look at it
Before
you pardon him. There's nothing to take a look at now. You've already done it. But it's that kind of diversion and distraction that he always uses that both the media and the Democrats need to call him out on. And I certainly will be there. I know my colleagues are focused on this. And I think so. I think we will spend less time on discussing changing the name of Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. And we will spend a lot more time focusing on his efforts to undo birthright citizenship, which is not an effort to make the border more secure, but is simply an effort to make America more white again, and to eliminate immigration. So those are the things that we will be focusing on a lot more, because they have much greater impact. And then, of course, pointing out the absence of anything having to do with addressing inflation, addressing affordability. He's putting tariffs on foreign countries. That's going to increase prices. He is working quietly, doesn't mention it in his inauguration speech, but working diligently and quietly on another massive tax cut for the billionaires who are up on stage with him, who have outsized influence over him, and who want tax cuts. And that's what he did last time. 87% of the 2017 tax cuts went to the top 1% of earners. And he is going to do that again this time, all while telling the middle class that he's helping them, when in fact he's hurting them. And so we'll be very, I think, more pointed and focused on what we are amplifying, but no less aggressive.
That's really encouraging to hear. It's the one bright spot in this next 4 years, seeing what resistance you all will be able to mount. I'm looking forward to talking with you about it in the future. Congressman, thank you so much for your time, and good luck.
Thanks, Josiah.